there, fans of the strange, dark, and mysterious. If you're into stories that make your skin crawl and keep you up at night, then buckle up, because this one's a doozy. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Next story. Under the bed. In late October of 2021, a routine call in Boise, Idaho, ended with one phrase in dispatch logs, "under the bed." Ethan Voss was 31 and worked as a paramedic with Ada County EMS, and he hated calls that felt delayed. He and his partner, Marisol Renteria, 28, and a hospital social worker riding along for outreach training, were sent to a small duplex rental. The tenant had dialed and hung up twice, then left a voicemail that sounded like whispering and muffled sobs. According to dispatch logs, the address was flagged for prior welfare checks from 2019 and 2020. The stated reason for being there was simple: confirm the caller's safety and clear the line for other emergencies. The tenant was listed as Jordan Mears, 26, a night shift stalker at a grocery warehouse on the west side of town. State records showed Jordan had recently changed a mailing address after a lease break and a short motel stay. Neighbors later recalled a quiet renter who carried groceries at midnight and avoided conversation in daylight. Some locals claimed Jordan mentioned a childhood fear and refused to store anything under the bed, even boxes. Investigators never confirmed that detail, but it appears in archive notes attached to a prior call. When Ethan and Marisol arrived, the duplex porch light was on and the front door was ajar by a few inches. Ethan called out and listened for movement, then stepped inside with his flashlight aimed low. The living room looked staged for an inspection: no clutter and no food and no shoes near the entry. A faint chemical smell lingered, reportedly similar to cleaning solvent used on vinyl flooring. The only sound was a slow tapping from deeper in the unit, like a loose vent cover shifting. Marisol stayed near the doorway as Ethan moved toward the short hallway that led to a bedroom and bathroom. He noted a line of salt scattered along the baseboard, which he first assumed was tracked in from outside. Dispatch logs do not mention salt, but Ethan later included it in a supplemental statement after the fact. He knocked on the bedroom door and announced himself again, then heard a short exhale from inside. The exhale was followed by a single word that both responders reported as help, though records conflict on volume. Ethan pushed the bedroom door open and saw a narrow room with blackout curtains and a bare dresser. A queen bed sat centered against the far wall with a thin comforter pulled tight and tucked like a hotel bed. On the nightstand, there was a phone with the screen lit, showing the emergency call interface and no active timer. The tapping sound was louder here and seemed to come from beneath the bed frame near the footboard. Ethan told Marisol to stay back and asked Jordan to show their hands, but no one answered from view. According to Ethan's account, he saw a forearm slide out from under the bed, palm up and shaking slightly. The wrist had a hospital band, though he could not read the printed line in the low light. He assumed Jordan had collapsed and crawled under the bed, a pattern he had seen with panic and intoxication. Ethan knelt and tried to speak calmly, saying he was there to help and needed the person to come out. The hand withdrew quickly, then the tapping resumed in a faster rhythm like knuckles on wood. Marisol said she heard whispering that did not match Ethan's voice, but she could not make out words. She described it as layered speech, like two people talking into a pillow, reportedly coming from under the bed. Ethan later disputed that, stating he only heard tapping and breathing and a faint scrape on the floorboards. Records conflict on this point because the radio traffic captured Marisol asking who else is in there. The dispatcher replied that no other units were on scene yet and asked if they needed police support. Ethan slid his flashlight beam under the bed and saw a pair of eyes reflecting light from the far side. He stated the eyes were too far back to belong to the visible forearm. as if two people were positioned head to toe. He also reported seeing something like a second phone screen glow for a moment, then go dark again. Investigators never confirmed the second phone, and the county file from 2009 shows similar claims in an unrelated case. Ethan stood and backed away, then asked for law enforcement and additional medical support over the radio. Within minutes, Deputy Aaron Keller, 44, arrived from the Ada County Sheriff's Office, responding as cover on a welfare check. Keller had a reputation for methodical reports, and he frequently cited state records and prior calls in his narratives. He entered the bedroom with Ethan and asked Marisol to remain in the hallway for safety and observation. Keller announced himself and ordered the person under the bed to come out slowly, hands visible and empty. The tapping stopped, and for several seconds the room fell silent, except for a low hum from an HVAC unit. Keller lowered to one knee and lifted the comforter edge to expose the bed skirt and the shadowed space below. He did not reach under immediately, according to his statement, because he could not see a clear line of hands. He shined his light and saw what he described as a face pressed close to the floor with dirt smeared around the mouth. The face did not match Jordan's driver license photo that Keller had pulled up on his phone in the hallway. Keller ordered Ethan to step back and called for a second deputy, citing possible trespass and unknown medical risk. At that moment, Keller reported hearing a soft laugh that stopped abruptly when he shifted his flashlight angle. Ethan did not report laughter, but he reported a quick inhale like someone trying not to cough. Marisol said she heard both laughter and coughing, though she admitted later she was watching shadows and felt disoriented. Dispatch logs show Marisol asked for the fire department to bring a thermal camera, which arrived later and was not used. Some locals claimed the duplex had a history of strange tenants, but investigators never confirmed a pattern in records. Keller then grabbed the bed frame and pulled it outward by about 2 feet, keeping his body angled away. As the bed shifted, something underneath scraped across the wood and made a sound like fingernails raking a plank. Keller wrote that he saw 2 sets of hands now, one pale and one darker, and both moving in small circles. Ethan described only one set of hands, but he later conceded he might have missed movement due to his position. Records conflict again because a short body camera clip shows a single hand retreating as the bed moves. The person under the bed suddenly slid forward, not crawling but pushing as if dragged from behind by someone unseen. Keller stated he saw Jordan's face then, eyes wide and unfocused, with a dried cut at the hairline. Jordan tried to speak, but produced only a hoarse sound and pointed back into the darkness under the bed frame. Ethan moved in to check breathing and airway, while Keller kept his light trained on the space Jordan indicated. The space looked empty for a beat, then the tapping started again from farther back, reportedly near the wall. Ethan guided Jordan into a sitting position and asked what happened, but Jordan kept shaking their head without words. Marisol entered the doorway and saw Jordan's hands trembling, then noticed bruising around the wrists like pressure marks. Ethan recorded vitals and noted mild hypothermia and an elevated pulse consistent with stress and prolonged hiding. Jordan's hospital band was real and matched a recent discharge, confirmed later through state records and hospital billing codes. Jordan finally whispered that something was under there and that it wasn't leaving, then pointed again at the bed. Keller ordered everyone back and used his baton to probe the space beneath the bed from a safe angle. The baton hit something soft and then something that sounded hollow, like plastic storage bins shifting. He pulled out a long, flat tote, and inside were folded clothes and a child's blanket with a cartoon print. The blanket was damp and smelled stale, reportedly like water left in a washer too long. Keller wrote that the tote had fresh dust disturbed on its lid, implying recent handling, though no prints were recovered. Under the tote, Keller found a second item, a narrow plywood panel that did not match the duplex flooring. The panel had scratch marks in parallel lines, as if dragged repeatedly across a rough surface. Ethan thought it might be a makeshift cover for something, but Keller noted the duplex had no basement access listed on property records. Still, Keller lifted one edge and saw a dark gap below, only a few inches deep, with compacted soil and debris. Investigators later debated whether it was an old crawlspace remnant or a repaired utility cavity, and records conflict. Jordan refused to stand near the bed again and kept their gaze on the doorway as if expecting someone to enter. Marisol tried grounding techniques and simple questions, asking who called and why the phone was left on the nightstand. Jordan reportedly said they didn't place the phone there and claimed it was in their pocket when they ran to the bedroom. Ethan checked Jordan's clothing and found no phone, and the nightstand phone showed a recent outgoing call to emergency services. Investigators never confirmed whether Jordan owned more than one phone because purchase records were incomplete. A second deputy arrived, and the officers cleared the small duplex room by room, finding no other person inside. They checked doors and windows, and Keller noted no forced entry and no footprints visible on the porch steps. The blackout curtains were pinned closed with binder clips, which Keller photographed for the file. Marisol later said the binder clips were odd because they looked newly placed, but that is not supported by other statements. The officers returned to the bedroom and focused on the area beneath the bed, now fully exposed by the shifted frame. What they found next is documented in Keller's report, but described differently in Ethan's medical narrative. Keller wrote that a thin line of hair, dark and coarse, was caught on a staple along the plywood panel edge. Ethan wrote it looked like nylon thread from clothing, and he did not believe it indicated a person. The hair or thread was not preserved in an evidence bag, reportedly because the scene was treated as medical first. County file from 2009 includes a note about missing trace evidence in another case, and Keller referenced it later. Jordan was transported to a hospital in Boise for evaluation, and Marisol rode along to assist with intake coordination. During the drive, Jordan reportedly whispered that the bed was the only place they could hide because it knew the closets. Marisol wrote that phrasing down exactly, but she noted she could not determine what Jordan meant by it. Investigators never confirmed whether Jordan was describing a person, a belief, or a misunderstanding from medication effects. State records show Jordan had been prescribed a short course of sedatives after a panic-related admission earlier that month. Back at the duplex, Keller requested property management records and prior maintenance notes for that unit and the adjacent one. Archive notes from 2019 mentioned a tenant who complained of tapping at night, always at the foot of the bed. The complaint was logged as plumbing noise and closed without inspection, according to the manager's statement. Another note from 2020 said a tenant claimed a child was crying under the bed, which was dismissed as TV audio bleed. Some locals claimed these notes were part of a long pattern, but the manager said turnover made it hard to verify. Keller also pulled a county file from 2009 involving a nearby rental complex, not the same street, but within Boise city limits. That file included a welfare check where a caller insisted someone lived under their bed and officers found only storage bins. However, the file also referenced a later burglary report where a suspect allegedly used crawlspace access to move between units. Keller noted the similarity and requested a building inspection of Jordan's duplex, focusing on subfloor cavities and vents. Inspectors later reported no accessible crawlspace, but records conflict because a second inspector noted patched plywood under carpet. In the days after the call, Jordan did not return to the duplex and broke the lease, confirmed through property documents. The landlord reported Jordan left most belongings behind, except clothing and personal papers and a small duffel bag. Among the left items was a notebook with short entries, mostly dates and single sentences, archived by investigators as notes. One entry referenced hearing breathing under the bed on 3 consecutive nights in 2021, spelled out in full. Another entry said the tapping moved when lights moved, which Keller treated as subjective and not a physical measurement. Neighbors were interviewed, and their accounts produced conflicting details that investigators never fully reconciled. One neighbor claimed they saw a tall man behind the duplex at around 2 a.m. the night before the call, carrying a tote. Another neighbor insisted no one could approach the back without stepping on gravel that would wake them, and they heard nothing. A third neighbor reportedly heard laughter through the wall, then a thud, then silence, but could not name a time. Dispatch logs show no noise complaint calls that night, and no CCTV coverage existed at that corner of the street. The most unsettling element, according to the file, was not the tote or the panel, but the absence of a clear second person. Keller wrote that Jordan's wrist bruises looked like restraint, yet hospital staff later described them as consistent with self-gripping. Ethan recorded that Jordan's knees were scraped as if crawling on rough flooring, but the bedroom floor was clean vinyl. Investigators never confirmed where those abrasions occurred, and records conflict on whether Jordan had been outside recently. Some locals claim the duplex had an old utility cavity under the bed area, but building diagrams did not show it. 2 weeks later, Keller returned with an inspector and a canine handler to recheck the bedroom for hidden access points. The dog alerted near the bed frame, then circled and alerted again near the baseboard where Ethan had seen scattered salt. The handler reportedly suggested the scent could be rodent activity or old food, and the alert was not treated as evidence alone. The inspector pulled the baseboard and found a narrow gap with insulation and dust, but no human-sized passage. Still, the inspector noted the subfloor had been cut and repaired at some point, and the repair date was unknown. Jordan's later statement, taken at the hospital, remained short and incomplete, reportedly due to anxiety and fatigue. Jordan claimed they woke to tapping under the bed, then felt a hand touch their ankle through the bedding. They said they called emergency services, but could not explain why the phone ended up on the nightstand instead of in hand. Jordan also claimed they heard someone repeating their name from beneath the bed, but investigators never confirmed audio sources. When asked if they saw a person, Jordan said only that it was close enough to breathe on them, then stopped talking. Ethan and Marisol were both asked to review their reports months later when the file was reopened for administrative audit. Ethan stood by his description of reflected eyes under the bed, but acknowledged it could have been a phone screen glare. Marisol stood by her claim of whispering, but admitted she was under stress and had never worked an active welfare check before. Keller stood by the presence of a second face early on, but his body camera did not capture a clear image. The audit summary concluded that the scene contained unusual claims but insufficient corroboration for criminal charges. Today, the duplex is occupied by new tenants, and property records show routine maintenance and a replaced bedroom floor. The case remains a closed welfare check with notes attached, including dispatch logs and archived notes and inspection summaries. Some locals claimed the tapping still happens, always near the foot of the bed, but investigators never confirmed new calls. What remains in the county file from 2009 and in the 2021 reports is a consistent detail. In a quiet bedroom in Boise, someone insisted the danger was not in the room, but under the bed. Next story. Cold Corner. In late autumn of 2019, people in Duluth, Minnesota started avoiding a corner near the old waterfront warehouses at night. The corner sat where Canal Park thinned into service roads, and the streetlight there flickered in county maintenance report. A night clerk named Owen Pike, age 28, worked inventory for a shipping supplier nearby. He kept walking that way because it cut 6 minutes off his route to the bus stop. In dispatch logs, the location was tagged as a recurring unknown trouble call with no clear pattern. Some locals claimed the air felt wrong there, but investigators never confirmed anything beyond complaints. Owen first noticed the corner because sounds seemed to change when he stepped into it. Tire noise softened, and even gulls went quiet for a few seconds. He told a friend it felt like someone was standing behind him, though he never saw anyone. Archived notes from a private security contractor described camera haze in that exact spot. State records showed no gas main leak, and weather data did not show unusual fog events. Records conflict on whether the street light was repaired in 2018 or 2019. On a Tuesday, after a double shift, Owen stopped by a late diner and met Mara Keller, age 34, a freelance photographer. Mara was in town to shoot industrial shoreline scenes for a small magazine assignment. She asked about the warehouses because she wanted empty frames without people. Owen mentioned the corner, and he described a cold patch that lingered even when the wind shifted. Mara laughed at first, then asked for the exact block so she could test her low-light settings. Neither of them called it paranormal, but both sounded uneasy in later interviews. They went together on the following evening, just after 9, with traffic thinning toward the lift bridge. Mara carried a DSLR and a compact tripod, and Owen brought a small flashlight. They stayed on public sidewalks and kept distance from any posted gates. According to her metadata, the first shots were clean, with normal color balance and expected grain. Then, over 3 minutes, her frames showed a widening blur near the curb line. She said the blur looked like breath on a lens, but the glass was dry and the temperature was stable. Owen insisted they walk through the corner slowly, then stop where the light pooled on cracked concrete. Mara set her tripod, aimed toward the warehouse wall, and started a 30-second exposure. During that exposure, Owen later reported a low knocking sound that seemed to come from inside the brick. He raised the flashlight, and the beam looked weak as it crossed the corner. Mara said she felt her fingers go numb, like she had touched frozen metal. Dispatch logs show a separate caller reported a man yelling nearby, but no officer found anyone at arrival. When Mara checked the photo, it showed an odd shape where the wall met shadow. It was not a figure, but a darker block that did not match the brick lines. She took 3 more images, changing aperture and shutter speed each time. The block persisted, but its edges shifted, as if the camera could not settle focus. Owen looked over her shoulder and said it reminded him of a doorway that was not there. County file from 2009 referenced a bricked service entrance in that section, yet later renovation permits removed it from diagrams. Investigators never confirmed whether the entrance ever existed, because the earliest plans were missing pages. They returned 2 nights later with a third person, Seth Marlowe, age 41, a city maintenance electrician. Seth agreed to meet them because he had been assigned to the flickering light months earlier. He brought a voltage tester and a fresh bulb, and he wanted to end the rumors. State records show the work order remained open, even after a listed completion date. Seth said the pole had normal draw in his prior visit, though the light kept acting up. Mara set her tripod again, and Owen kept watch for traffic. The corner looked ordinary until Seth stepped directly under the lamp and the glow dimmed hard. Seth tapped the pole with a gloved knuckle and listened, like he expected a loose housing. He later told an officer it sounded hollow for a second, then it sounded solid again. He opened the access panel, checked wiring, and found no corrosion. Reportedly, his tester read stable voltage, even as the light winked off twice. Mara captured video in short clips, and the audio carried a faint scraping sound behind their voices. Investigators later said scraping could be wind against signage, but the nearest sign was 2 blocks away. Records conflict on whether any construction fencing stood there that week. The next morning, Owen called non-emergency dispatch and asked if anyone else had filed complaints about that corner. The dispatcher noted several calls about cold air and shadow movement, but she said none were actionable. Dispatch logs list one call in early winter of 2011 describing a woman crying near the warehouses. Responding officers reported empty sidewalks and a locked gate with no signs of forced entry. Another entry in 2014 mentions a driver who swore a person stepped into the road, yet no collision occurred. Investigators never confirmed identities for those callers because the numbers were outdated. Owen wrote the details down in a small notebook he kept for work schedules. Mara began digging into older documents for her magazine piece, and she requested permits through the county office. In archived notes, a clerk flagged a folder labeled Corner Incident, then corrected herself and said it was Concrete Spall Reports. The folder, reportedly, had a misfiled police supplement from 2009. That supplement mentioned a missing dock worker last seen near the warehouses after a night shift. It described a search that ended without evidence, and it referenced an unusual cold zone noted by volunteers. Investigators never confirmed the cold zone detail because the supplement existed only as a faint photocopy with missing signatures. County file from 2009 lists the worker's name, but later state records show a different date of disappearance. Owen's routine shifted after that, and he started taking a longer route that stayed closer to lit storefronts. He told Mara he did not want to test it anymore, and he avoided the corner even during daylight. Mara kept returning alone for photos because she believed repetition would reveal a technical explanation. She logged each visit in a notebook with temperature and wind direction, and she noted consistent numbness in her right hand. Her doctor later found mild circulation issues, but it did not explain why symptoms appeared only at that location. Mara tried changing lenses, filters, and memory cards, yet the blur returned in the same zone. Some locals claimed she was provoking something, though she never reported seeing a figure or hearing a clear voice. On one visit, Mara arrived at 6:30 p.m. and found a city barricade placed partly across the sidewalk. No permit record matched the barricade, and no nearby project signs were posted. She stepped around it and filmed the pavement, focusing on a hairline crack that ran toward the curb. In the video, the crack looked like it swallowed light, then released it as she shifted angle. The effect could have been compression artifacts, but the same effect appeared on two different cameras. Mara said she felt a pressure in her ears while she filmed, like riding an elevator. Dispatch logs that night show a brief call about equipment theft, but officers listed the suspect as unknown and the outcome as unfounded. A week later, Seth returned on his own after his supervisor asked about the open light work order. He brought a ladder truck and a coworker, but the coworker stayed in the cab. Seth climbed up, replaced the bulb, and checked the photocell sensor. He reported everything looked normal, yet the light pulsed as soon as he descended. The coworker later said the truck radio hissed only while parked at the corner. State records for radio interference complaints show no entries for that day. Seth filed a note that the pole might need replacement, though no budget request followed. Records conflict on whether the city later swapped the pole in 2020 because the asset tag number changes mid-year. Owen tried to put the corner out of his mind, but he started waking up at 3:10 a.m. for several nights. He could not explain why that minute stuck, and he did not claim dreams or visions. He checked his phone and saw missed call notifications from an unknown number, yet the call log showed no caller ID. His provider later stated such ghost entries can occur, but the timing was consistent for 4 nights. Owen wrote down the times, and he compared them with the dispatch logs Mara had collected. One log entry from 2011 listed a call at 3:10 a.m. from a payphone that no longer existed. Investigators never confirmed the payphone location because old maps were inconsistent. Mara asked Owen to meet her again because she believed she had found a physical feature causing the cold patch. She had noticed a storm drain grate near the curb that looked newer than the surrounding concrete. County maintenance records showed a drainage repair in 2016, but the work description was vague. Mara thought cold air might flow up from a tunnel, creating a chill and fogging lenses. Owen agreed to stand at the edge while she used a small smoke pen to test airflow. The smoke drifted normally for a moment, then dropped straight down as if pulled. That effect could be a gust or pressure change, yet the surrounding flags and tree branches did not move. Mara packed up fast and walked away without speaking. In the following days, she requested access to the storm drain plans through a public records portal. The portal returned partial diagrams with entire sections blacked out, reportedly due to infrastructure security. In archive notes, a city engineer mentioned old utility corridors under the warehouses built in phases. The engineer also wrote that several corridors were sealed after water damage, but he did not specify locations. Mara compared the diagram scale to her photos, and she believed a sealed corridor might run beneath the corner. Investigators never confirmed any corridor beneath that specific sidewalk because the maps did not align across years. Records conflict on whether the sealing happened in 2013 or 2015. A local blogger noticed Mara filming and posted about the cold corner, which drew late-night visitors. Within 3 weekends, police had to disperse small groups using flashlights and phones. Dispatch logs show multiple calls about trespassing, though most people stayed on sidewalks. One officer wrote that several visitors complained of nausea and tingling hands, but he could not corroborate those symptoms. Another officer wrote that the area was quiet but unpleasant, without further detail. State records show no hazardous material alert, and air quality readings nearby were within normal range. Some locals claimed the corner was cursed, yet no official report used that language. Then, a new event shifted the tone, because a delivery driver named Carlos Wynn, age 22, filed a formal statement. Carlos worked for a food distributor and delivered to restaurants along the harbor. He said he parked near the corner at 11:40 p.m. and heard a scraping from the brick wall. He looked up and saw what he described as a dark rectangle, like an opening, but he could not see inside it. He said cold air hit his face and his phone battery dropped from 48 to 3 inches less than a minute. Investigators never confirmed the battery claim, yet state records show Carlos replaced his phone the next day. Records conflict on whether his delivery stop was scheduled there because his company logs were incomplete. Carlos's statement included a detail that matched Owen's earlier description, which made Owen uneasy again. He agreed to speak with an investigator from the county sheriff's office, though the location sat within city limits. The investigator reviewed dispatch logs and noted several complaints centered on that same curb line. He also referenced archived notes about a missing dock worker, and he admitted the file was messy. He visited the corner during daylight, photographed the sidewalk, and took temperature readings. His report stated the corner was 6 degrees colder than a spot 30 feet away, with no clear cause. Investigators never confirmed the method used for those readings because the instrument model was not recorded. County file from 2009 was attached, but the staple marks suggested missing pages. Mara offered her photos and videos, and she provided metadata to show dates and times. The investigator noted repeated blur artifacts, but he said lens haze can appear in coastal air. Mara countered that the artifacts centered in the same place, across different humidity levels. She also showed one frame where the brick texture seemed to smear sideways while her tripod remained stable. The investigator did not call it evidence, but he logged it as anomalous visual distortion. Reportedly, he asked the city to inspect the wall for hidden vents or damaged insulation. The city inspection report came back with no findings. But state records show the inspection took only 12 minutes. Records conflict on whether inspectors entered the warehouse interior at all. Weeks passed, and the online attention faded, but the corner remained a point of quiet avoidance for locals. Owen resumed his longer route, and he stopped discussing the corner at work. Mara finished her magazine assignment, yet she kept one page in her notebook titled Cold Corner Timeline. Carlos moved to a different delivery route, and he refused follow-up interviews. Dispatch logs show fewer calls afterward, though occasional reports continued into spring. Some locals claimed the corner settled down, yet no one could define what that meant. Investigators never confirmed a change because no consistent monitoring existed. In early summer of 2020, Mara returned to Duluth for unrelated work and walked past the warehouses in daylight. She found the streetlight pole replaced, and the concrete patch near the curb looked freshly poured. There was no plaque, no notice, and no public explanation posted. She photographed the patch and compared it to older shots, and she noticed the storm drain grate was now a different style. State records for roadwork permits listed a sidewalk repair, but the location field was abbreviated and unclear. Mara requested the full permit, but she received a reply that the file was archived off-site. Archive notes from the permit office stated, "File movement due to backlog without a retrieval date." Records conflict on whether the work happened in May or June because invoices and permits did not match. Owen later told a friend that the corner felt normal again, yet he still would not stand there alone at night. He did not claim relief, only habit and caution. Seth said the old pole had been marked for removal due to internal rust, which could explain the flicker. He also said the city sometimes replaces grates during repairs, which could affect airflow. Mara agreed those were plausible explanations, yet she could not explain the repeating blur pattern across seasons. Carlos never returned calls, and he asked through a coworker to be left alone. Investigators never confirmed any single cause because each potential explanation left something unresolved. Some locals claimed it was proof of something beyond records, though the records themselves offered only gaps and contradictions. The county sheriff's office closed the informal inquiry without declaring an outcome, and the file was marked as information only. The investigator wrote that the case contained conflicting accounts, incomplete documentation, and ordinary factors that could produce unusual sensations. He also wrote that multiple witnesses reported the same corner line, which he found notable but not determinative. Dispatch logs remained public, yet many caller details were missing due to routine retention rules. County file from 2009 stayed in the archive, and the missing pages were never recovered. State records show no further work orders for that block, at least under the same asset tag numbers. Records conflict on what changed and why it changed when attention peaked. Even now, people who walk that stretch sometimes adjust their path without realizing it. They step wider around the repaired patch, and they move faster under the new light. Some locals claimed the corner still feels colder on windless nights, but investigators never confirmed the claim with repeatable measurements. Mara kept her raw files backed up, and she labeled the folder with the title she used in her notes. Owen kept his notebook too, though he stopped writing times after the last 3:10 a.m. Wake-ups ended. Carlos, reportedly, tells new coworkers not to park there, and he gives no reason. The corner remains just concrete and brick in public descriptions, yet it also remains a place where the story never fully settles. Next story. The Closet. On a cold week in Asheville, North Carolina, a rental house produced complaints that never matched any one explanation. In early 2019, Claire Hensley was 29, a respiratory therapist, and she needed a quiet place near Mission Hospital. She signed a 6-month lease on a small bungalow in West Asheville, planning to sleep between night shifts. Her only priority was silence, because her schedule already kept her isolated from friends. The landlord mentioned nothing unusual, and state records listed no recent violations at the address. Claire moved in on a Sunday afternoon, unpacked 2 suitcases, then noticed the hallway closet door sat slightly off-center. The closet was narrow, painted white, and it held a single shelf with a metal rod. She assumed it had swollen from humidity because the wood frame looked older than the rest. Still, the latch clicked shut with a sharp sound that carried through the house. She reportedly texted a friend that the click sounded like a lock on a cheap locker. By her 3rd night shift week, Claire started leaving the closet door cracked, hoping it would stop sticking. It did not, and she began finding it fully closed when she returned home near dawn. She told herself she must be closing it without thinking, since exhaustion can erase small details. Then she noticed the knob felt colder than the surrounding wall, even after the heat ran all night. Dispatch logs show no calls from the address during that first week. 2 days later, Claire called her older brother, Evan Hensley, who was 34 and worked as a building inspector for Buncombe County. She asked him to stop by after work and check for warped hinges or a misaligned strike plate. Evan's goal was simple: to confirm whether the door was binding from settling or moisture. He arrived with a small toolkit and a handheld level, treating it like routine maintenance. In archived notes from his office, he later described the frame as surprisingly square. Evan tested the hinges and found no loose screws, and the latch met the plate cleanly. He pressed the door shut, and it clicked with that same hard, hollow snap. He tried closing it softly, but the final inch pulled itself inward as if suction finished the job. Evan checked for drafts, yet the hallway felt still, and the house windows were locked. He reportedly joked that the door was just proud of itself. That evening, Claire worked another shift and returned at 6 a.m., stepping into a dark hallway lit by her phone screen. She stopped because the closet door was open, wider than she ever left it. Inside, her winter coat hung from the rod, but the sleeve was twisted like someone had pinched it. Claire did not call the police because nothing was missing and the window latches were intact. Still, she photographed the closet and saved the images with timestamps. Over the next week, small inconsistencies continued, and none of them proved a clear cause. The closet door would be shut when she left, then open after she showered. The knob would show a faint smudge, then later look wiped clean. Claire began placing a strip of painter's tape across the seam, hoping to confirm movement. Each time she checked, the tape was broken along the edge, but the pieces were not on the floor. Evan returned on a Saturday, and he brought a simple battery door sensor meant for apartments. He installed it inside the frame, then tested it repeatedly until it chimed every time. Claire's goal was proof, because her fatigue made her doubt her own memory. Evan's goal was to rule out ordinary causes before she asked the landlord for changes. They left the closet closed, and Evan told her to record any chirps on her phone. At 2:13 a.m. the next night, the sensor chirped once, and Claire woke in a sweat on her couch. She checked the hallway and found the closet door still shut, and the sensor light showed no recent trigger. She returned to bed, but at 2:19 a.m., it chirped again, then stopped. In the morning, she found the sensor shifted slightly downward, as if the adhesive had softened. Records conflict on the house temperature that night because her thermostat log did not save. Claire reported the issue to her landlord, a man named Mark Dever, who managed several properties around Asheville. Mark was 46, and he said he had never heard complaints about that closet. He agreed to send a handyman, but he also asked whether Claire had pets or visitors. She said no, because she lived alone and worked nights. Mark reportedly reminded her that old houses expand and contract, and he suggested a dehumidifier. The handyman arrived and replaced the latch, then planed a thin strip from the door edge. For 2 days, the door moved smoothly, and the click softened into a dull thud. Claire began sleeping without leaving lights on, and she stopped checking the hallway first. Then, on the 3rd day, she woke to a smell like damp cardboard in the living room. She followed it to the closet, where the air felt warmer than the hallway. Inside the closet, the paint near the baseboard looked blistered, like moisture had been trapped behind it. Evan later examined it and said it resembled heat exposure, but there was no scorch mark and no outlet nearby. Claire took another photo and sent it to Evan, asking if mold could cause the smell. Evan said mold was possible, but the pattern looked localized and odd. County file from 2009 shows a previous permit for electrical work, but the description was limited. Evan requested public records for the property, and he pulled what he could from state records and county archives. The house had changed owners multiple times, and several files were scanned with missing pages. There was an old note about a plumbing repair near the hall, but the diagram did not match the closet wall. Evan found an incident report from 2011 involving a welfare check, yet the name was partially redacted. Investigators never confirmed any connection to Claire's lease. Meanwhile, Claire tried to create a simple timeline because her nights blurred together. She marked the closet knob with a tiny dot of washable ink and photographed it daily. Some mornings the dot appeared smeared, and other mornings it looked untouched. Claire also began placing a folded receipt on the closet threshold, like a trap for movement. On multiple dates, the receipt was gone, and she found it later under her couch. Evan suggested a camera, but Claire resisted because she did not want to feel like she lived under surveillance. Still, she bought a small indoor camera and pointed it toward the hallway, careful to avoid her bedroom door. The camera recorded motion events, but the hallway lights were off, so most clips were grainy. Reportedly, several clips showed the closet door shifting by a few inches, then stopping. The timestamps clustered around 2 a.m., which matched her sensor chirps. Claire sent the clips to Evan, and he watched them frame by frame on his office computer. He said the movement looked like pressure changes, but the door did not swing like a draft. It moved in small increments, then paused like someone was testing it. Evan checked the camera settings and confirmed the clip length was consistent. He also noted that no other objects moved in the hallway during those events. At this point, Claire asked Mark to change the locks, even though she had no evidence of an intruder. Mark agreed, and he replaced both exterior deadbolts with new hardware. He also said the previous tenant left abruptly, though he would not explain why. Some locals claimed the last tenant complained about noises, but investigators never confirmed that story. Dispatch logs show a single medical call near the block in 2017, but it may be unrelated. After the locks changed, Claire experienced 2 quiet nights, and she felt relief that reminded her how tense she had become. On the 3rd night, she returned home and saw the closet door standing fully open, perfectly squared with the hallway. The interior light was off, but the closet looked brighter than it should, as if it reflected streetlight. Claire stepped closer and saw her coats arranged by color, which she had never done. She stood still and listened, hearing only the hum of her refrigerator. Claire called Evan and asked him to come immediately because she was shaking and could not stop scanning the windows. Evan arrived within 20 minutes, and he walked the house slowly, checking each lock and window latch. He found no entry point and no sign of forced access. Yet when he reached the closet, he stopped and stared at the shelf. On the top shelf sat a single old key, covered in dust, which neither of them recognized. Evan photographed the key, then placed it in a plastic bag, treating it like evidence even though he was not law enforcement. The key looked like an older interior lock key, not a modern deadbolt. Claire said she had never seen it and she did not store anything on that shelf. Evan asked Mark about it, and Mark reportedly said he did not know because the house was cleaned before each lease. State records did not list any missing property from the unit, and no report mentioned a key. Evan later took the key to a locksmith in Asheville, hoping to identify the brand or a matching lock type. The locksmith said it resembled a common skeleton key blank, but it was cut for a specific worded lock. He also said it did not match modern doors, and it likely belonged to a cabinet, trunk, or interior closet. Evan asked if it could open the hallway closet, but the closet had no keyhole. The locksmith reportedly suggested it came from something removed long ago. That suggestion pushed Evan toward the wall itself because old houses sometimes hide sealed spaces. He returned with a stud finder and a thermal camera borrowed from a colleague. The thermal image showed a narrow vertical strip inside the closet wall that held cooler temperature than the surrounding plaster. Evan tapped the wall and heard a faint change in tone like hollow space behind it. He did not cut anything because he lacked permission and Claire feared escalation. Still, he marked the spot with painter's tape for later. Claire's sleep worsened, and her night shifts became a loop of anxiety and caffeine. She started hearing a soft scrape when she passed the hallway, though she could not locate the source. She wrote down times and tried to match them to wind patterns, but the sound appeared on still nights too. One evening, she stood by the closet with her phone recording audio, and she heard a brief double knock from inside. The audio was faint and could be a pipe contraction, yet the timing unsettled her. On a Friday morning, Claire returned from work and found her camera unplugged with the cord coiled neatly beside it. The outlet tested fine, and the plug fit tightly when she reinserted it. Claire checked her recorded clips and saw the last event ended at 1:58 a.m. Then, nothing. She searched the house for signs of a visitor, but everything looked undisturbed. Reportedly, she called non-emergency police for advice, and they recommended stronger exterior lighting. A patrol officer visited that afternoon, checked the doors, and asked Claire routine questions about her schedule and contacts. The officer's notes were brief, and dispatch logs listed as a suspicious circumstances call. He did not open walls or inspect the attic because there was no probable cause. He did suggest that someone with an old key could still enter through a window, yet he found no pry marks. Claire asked about the closet specifically, and he advised her to keep valuables secured elsewhere. That night, Claire stayed with a coworker, leaving the house empty except for her camera, which she plugged back in. In the morning, she returned with Evan, both of them alert and tired. The camera had recorded one motion event at 2:07 a.m., showing the closet door open slowly to about 6 inches. Then the image glitched and the clip ended early, like the file corrupted. Archived notes from Evan later mentioned the camera clock remained accurate. Evan decided they needed permission to involve a professional, and he pushed Mark for a more serious inspection. Mark agreed to let Evan conduct a limited check, and he also hired a licensed contractor to look for hidden moisture or wiring. The contractor used a small borescope through an existing crack near the baseboard. The borescope showed a cavity with rough framing and debris, but it did not clearly reveal a doorway. Records conflict on the cavity depth because the contractor estimated without measurement. The contractor also found an old vent path that had been sealed, and he said it might connect to the crawlspace. He recommended sealing gaps and adding a vapor barrier under the house, which sounded plausible and boring. Claire wanted boring, so she agreed, even if it cost her peace. Mark approved the work, and it took 2 days with crews entering the crawlspace. Afterward, the closet smell faded and the knob no longer felt cold. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing happened, and Claire began to doubt the entire ordeal. She worked, slept, and stopped checking the hallway camera every morning. Then one afternoon, she came home early and saw the closet door shut, but the new latch sat halfway engaged. The door was closed enough to look normal, yet it was not latched, like someone had pulled it to but avoided the click. Claire opened it and found the shelf empty, including the bagged key which she had stored there. Claire searched every drawer and cabinet, then checked the kitchen trash, hoping she had moved it absent-mindedly. She found the plastic bag in her bathroom sink, dry and placed flat, as if set down carefully. The key was inside, and the seal was unbroken, which meant the bag had not been opened. Claire photographed it again because she feared her own memory was failing. Investigators never confirmed whether anyone else entered, and Mark denied having a spare after the lock change. Evan suggested Claire end the lease early because evidence was thin and stress was becoming the real threat. Claire agreed, and she asked Mark for a release, citing sleep disruption and safety concerns. Mark refused at first, then offered a partial penalty, and the negotiation dragged for days. Claire continued living there while packing, and she kept the camera running as a precaution. During that final week, the camera recorded no motion events in the hallway at all. On her last morning, Claire did a slow walkthrough, checking closets and cabinets, ensuring she left nothing behind. She reached the hallway closet and found the painter's tape Mark Evan placed, still stuck to the wall. She peeled it away, and behind it, the paint looked slightly darker, like an old patch. Claire ran her fingers over it and felt a faint ridge, almost like a seam. She stepped back and decided not to press further because she wanted out more than answers. Claire moved into a newer apartment near downtown Asheville, and she reported sleeping better within a week. Evan kept copies of her photos and the camera clips, storing them with his own notes. He later requested additional public records, but several files were inaccessible due to retention limits. County file from 2009 remained the most detailed, yet it never mentioned a hidden cavity. Some locals claimed the house had a sealed servant passage, but no plan ever surfaced to prove it. Mark rented the bungalow again within 2 months, and publicly it remained an ordinary property with no warnings. Dispatch logs show no repeated police calls from the address in the months after Claire left. Claire never claimed she saw a ghost, and she never said the closet was cursed. She only said that the door behaved like a decision, opening and closing with purpose but leaving no fingerprints. In the end, the only lasting evidence was a key with no lock and a wall that sounded hollow when tapped. Next story. The Ritual. On a wet October night in Eugene, Oregon, a routine welfare check turned into a case that locals still describe in whispers. Ethan Klein was 34, a county paramedic, and he was trying to clear calls fast before his morning shift ended. Dispatch logs reportedly show Ethan was sent to the River Industrial District after a neighbor heard chanting inside an empty warehouse. Marla Jensen was 29, a graduate student researching folk belief, and she had asked to ride along for a public safety project. They arrived to find the loading door chained, yet warm light pulsed through cracked windows like someone moved lanterns inside. Some locals claimed the building hosted a monthly ritual, but investigators never confirmed any organized group at that location. Ethan circled the warehouse, then found a side entrance propped with a brick as if someone expected a quick exit. Inside, the air smelled of damp cardboard and candle wax, and the concrete floor was marked with chalk rings. Marla pointed out symbols she recognized from archived notes, though she admitted they were common and easily copied. At the center sat a folding chair facing a wall of hanging tarps, and a portable speaker played low static. Ethan called out, identified himself, and waited, but only the static answered, steady and deliberately loud. State records later noted no forced entry, yet the chain outside appeared freshly tightened and correctly locked. Behind the tarps, they found a small room built from pallets, with a camera tripod aimed at the chair. A handwritten list was taped to the wall, and it read like instructions, short steps ending in the word ritual. Marla photographed it, then noticed the final line mentioned a name, and the name matched a missing person report. The county file from 2009 described a similar list found after a barn fire, though the phrasing did not match. Ethan radioed for police because the missing person was a 22-year-old mechanic named Tyler Boone. Deputy Lyle Navarro, 52, responded from the west side, and he arrived with an evidence kit and a tired expression. Lyle's job was usually property crime, and he wanted a clean report that did not invite rumors or media attention. The three of them found drag marks leading to a drain channel, and they followed them toward the back wall. There, under a tarp weighted with stones, lay Tyler's jacket, soaked through and arranged as if it was displayed. No body was present, yet the jacket pocket held a phone that still had battery, and it still recorded audio. The audio was mostly footsteps and breathing, then a man's voice repeating numbers, then silence that lasted 7 minutes. Investigators later argued whether that silence meant the recording stopped or whether someone muted sound intentionally. Marla told Lyle the numbers could be a meditation count, though she warned that interpretation depended on context. Ethan asked why Tyler would be here, and Lyle answered that Tyler's last known location was a nearby bar. Reportedly, bar staff said Tyler left with 2 strangers, one tall woman and one man wearing a hunting cap. Records conflict on the time he left because receipts show one timestamp while a security camera clock drifted. Lyle photographed the chalk rings, and he noted one ring was smudged as if someone crawled out of it. In the pallet room, a small bowl held ash and hair clippings, and a receipt for lighter fluid sat beneath. Some locals claimed hair offerings were part of old mountain curses, yet archived notes call that a modern invention. Ethan found a second list under the chair, and this one included Tyler's name and the phrase, "keep him awake." Marla asked if Tyler had sleep issues, and Lyle said Tyler's girlfriend mentioned nightmares and sudden night terrors. State records show Tyler had no prior arrests, but he had visited an urgent care twice for insomnia symptoms. At the warehouse, a faint humming came from a corner where a cooler ran on extension cords and a car battery. Inside the cooler were water bottles and two sealed syringes, still packaged, and a vial labeled saline. Lyle bagged the items because the presence of syringes shifted the case from rumor toward possible coercion. Ethan noticed the speaker cable ran into the pallet room and the static sound could be turned off remotely. Marla said that matched certain initiation stories where sensory overload was used to break resistance gradually. Investigators never confirmed that claim, but they documented the equipment like it was meant for a controlled session. The next morning, a search team swept the riverbank and they found shoe prints that started, then ended abruptly. Dispatch logs reportedly note a K9 unit circled the same spot, then refused to track farther into the reeds. Some locals claimed the dog sensed something unnatural, though handlers later wrote the animal was simply exhausted. In county interviews, Tyler's girlfriend said he recently joined an online group focused on lucid dreaming techniques. Archived notes from 2011 mention similar groups spreading ritual language, often as pranks and challenges. Lyle requested Tyler's laptop, and state records show the device had browser tabs about protection symbols and circles. One tab described a ritual to avoid a shadow visitor, a phrase that sounded paranormal but also matched sleep paralysis talk. Ethan stayed involved because he felt responsible, and he had walked into that warehouse without knowing the stakes. Marla stayed involved because her research suddenly had a real victim, and she wanted evidence instead of folklore. A week later, a janitor at a storage facility in Springfield found a duffel bag, and it contained chalk and tarps. The facility camera showed a pickup arriving after midnight, yet the plate was unreadable due to glare and drizzle. Lyle traced the pickup model to several owners, and he wrote that none could be eliminated without better imaging. Records conflict again here, because one witness described a blue truck, while another insisted it was dark green. In the duffel bag, there was also a printed sheet titled The Ritual, with checkboxes and a final line-reading release. Marla said the wording resembled roleplay scripts, yet the checkmarks suggested someone followed it step by step. Investigators never confirmed whether Tyler printed it or whether someone printed it to frame him after the fact. 2 days after that, Tyler's phone pinged a tower near Cottage Grove, then went silent again without any outgoing calls. Dispatch logs reportedly show officers searched that area, but heavy rain erased tracks and flooded low trails. Some locals claimed the rain itself was part of the ritual, though state records simply listed as seasonal weather. Ethan reviewed the phone audio, and he noticed the numbers spoken were not random because they repeated in a pattern. Marla compared the pattern to archived notes, and she found a similar sequence used in breathing drills for endurance. Lyle argued it could be a code because the sequence matched a locker combination from Tyler's workplace locker. At Tyler's garage, investigators opened the locker, and they found only a clean shirt and a torn page from a journal. The journal page listed dates written as words, including 2019, and it described a dream of drowning. Records conflict on who wrote that page, since Tyler's mother said the handwriting was not his, but his coworker disagreed. Marla asked why the dream mattered, and Lyle said it mattered because the river search had found nothing at all. A month later, a fisherman found a camera memory card lodged in driftwood, and it was labeled with Tyler's initials. The card contained short clips of Tyler sitting in the warehouse chair, eyes open, hands shaking, breathing fast. In one clip, a voice off camera said, "Do not sleep." Then the static speaker rose, and Tyler flinched violently. Investigators never confirmed the voice identity because the audio was distorted and the face of the speaker stayed hidden. Lyle wrote that the setup looked staged for intimidation, but he could not rule out that Tyler volunteered at first. Marla pointed to the chalk circles because Tyler's shoes never crossed the lines in the footage, like he feared stepping out. Some locals claimed circles were protective, yet archived notes show circles are also used to mark camera framing simply. Ethan focused on Tyler's medical state because his pupils looked wide and his skin looked clammy under the warehouse light. State records show the saline vial was never tested for contamination because chain of custody issues delayed processing. That delay became a problem later because defense attorneys argued evidence handling was too sloppy for conclusions. In December, Lyle got an anonymous call, and dispatch logs reportedly captured the caller saying the ritual went wrong. The caller claimed Tyler was meant to be kept awake for 72 hours, then released, then praised for surviving it. Investigators never confirmed the 72-hour claim, yet county interviews note Tyler disappeared for roughly that duration. When Lyle asked for a meeting, the caller hung up, and the number traced to a prepaid phone bought with cash. Marla suspected an initiation game because online communities sometimes dared members to extreme sleep deprivation tests. Ethan suspected something darker because Tyler's shaking looked like fear, and the camera angle suggested control. Lyle suspected both because county file from 2009 described a teen group that escalated dares into assault. That older file ended without charges because witnesses recanted and the lead investigator retired soon after. Records conflict about whether that old group disbanded because archived notes mention a reunion, but no names match. In January, hikers near Oak Ridge found a shallow pit with burnt candle stubs and a scrap of Tyler's work badge. The pit also contained zip ties and a crushed energy drink can, and Lyle photographed everything in place. State records show the bad scrap had river silt on it, which suggested it traveled, but it could not show how. Some locals claimed the badge was an offering, though investigators never confirmed any spiritual motive behind it. Marla noticed the candle brand matched the ones bought at a local discount store, and she tracked purchases by receipts. That approach failed because the store did not keep detailed surveillance that far back, and records had already rolled off. Ethan attended the search briefing, and he watched Tyler's family as they listened, silent, like they expected the worst. Lyle kept his language careful because he knew how rumors spread, and he avoided words like cult in official notes. In February, the warehouse burned in a small fire, and the official cause was an electrical fault near extension cords. Dispatch logs reportedly note the fire started hours after an unmarked car was seen idling nearby, though witnesses varied. Records conflict on that car description because one report said sedan, while another said small SUV with a roof rack. The fire destroyed chalk residue and tape, and it removed the most physical context for Tyler's recorded footage. Marla later said the loss of the warehouse made every interpretation easier to dispute because nothing could be remeasured. Lyle's supervisor pushed for closure because without a body, prosecutors hesitated and the county disliked open cases. Ethan kept thinking about the lock chain outside because someone had locked it from the inside or someone returned later. State records show a locksmith examined the chain, and he concluded it was a common model that many keys could fit. That meant the chain proved little. Yet it continued to anchor local stories because it felt impossible to casual observers. In March, Tyler's phone surfaced again, this time powered on, and it connected briefly near a rest stop on Interstate 5. The device sent one text to Tyler's girlfriend that said, "I did it," then it powered off, and no further pings occurred. Investigators never confirmed who typed that text because fingerprints were smeared and the phone casing was wiped clean. Some locals claimed the message was a curse signature, though archived notes call that a narrative pattern after disappearances. Lyle obtained toll camera images, and he found a pickup similar to the earlier one, but the angle still hid the plate. Marla looked at the driver's silhouette, and she said the posture could match a woman, though she admitted it was guesswork. Ethan wondered if Tyler was alive and moving, because the phone kept traveling, yet no hospitals reported him admitted. State records show no Social Security activity, no employment activity, and no verified sightings beyond that rest stop. In April, a college student posted a video online claiming he attended the ritual, and he showed a printed checklist. The checklist matched the one in the duffel bag, but the student blurred names and refused to share the full file. Investigators interviewed him, yet records conflict on his story because he changed the location and the number of participants. Lyle wrote that the student might be chasing attention, though he could not dismiss the matching paperwork entirely. Marla requested the student's messages, and she reportedly found group chats discussing Tyler as a legend, not a person. Those chats used ritual language, but they also used jokes, and that mix made intent hard to determine for investigators. Ethan sat with Marla after one interview, and they both noticed how calm the student sounded describing sleepless fear. Some locals claimed that calm was proof of possession, though investigators never confirmed anything beyond social imitation understanding. In May, Lyle reopened the 2009 file, and he found an archived note about a symbol drawn as 3 nested circles. That exact symbol appeared in Tyler's footage, faint on the floor, and it looked older than the fresh chalk lines. Records conflict about when that symbol was drawn because the warehouse owner claimed he never saw it, yet photos showed dust pattern. Marla suggested the symbol could have been painted years earlier, then revived by someone who wanted to connect old stories to new acts. Ethan asked whether that meant a single organizer, and Lyle answered that the evidence supported multiple possibilities equally. In June, a diver found Tyler's wallet snagged on debris in a slow bend of the river miles from the warehouse district. The wallet contained cash and a library card, and nothing else, and the leather looked too clean for long submersion. Investigators never confirmed how long it was in the water because algae growth was minimal and temperature cycles complicate estimates. Some locals claimed the river returned it when the ritual ended, though state records only noted it as recovered property. Lyle brought the wallet to Tyler's mother, and he documented her reaction because he feared she would interpret it as certainty. She said it felt staged, like someone wanted them to stop searching, and her words were added to county interview notes. Marla later said staged objects are common in cases where perpetrators enjoy control. Yet she also admitted volunteers sometimes stage hope. Ethan avoided making statements because his role was medical, and he had learned how certainty can harm families twice. In July, a reporter obtained the warehouse footage through a leak, and the story spread, calling it a ritual kidnapping. Lyle publicly denied any confirmed ritual group because investigators never confirmed structure, leadership, or membership records. That denial angered locals because some locals claimed they had heard chanting for years, yet they never filed formal complaints. Records conflict on those claims because earlier dispatch logs show no such calls, though one log shows a vague noise complaint. In August, Marla received an envelope with no return address, and inside was a flash drive wrapped in wax paper. The flash drive held a scanned document labeled Initiation Rules, and it included Tyler's name and a date written as words. The date was 2019, yet Tyler vanished in a later year, so investigators questioned whether the document was copied. Lyle noted the mismatch, and he wrote that the date conflict suggested either fabrication or a longer planning timeline. The document also listed 3 roles: watcher, keeper, and witness, and those terms appeared in the student group chats. Investigators never confirmed if those roles were real because no suspect admitted involvement and no physical roster existed. Ethan asked Marla why someone would mail that, and she said because uncertainty is power, and the sender wanted it preserved. Lyle filed it, labeled it unverified, and he compared printer artifacts with known samples, but no match was found. In September, a new deputy found old evidence, photos misfiled, and one image showed the warehouse chain with a small key tag. That key tag had a logo from a local self-storage business, and Lyle contacted them for records, hoping for a link. The storage business had changed owners, and state records show older contracts were discarded during a renovation cleanup. Records conflict here too, because an employee claimed backups existed while the owner insisted they never kept digital archives. Marla said these gaps become the story because empty spaces invite paranormal explanations even when mundane reasons are likely. Ethan listened, silent, and he watched how each missing piece pushed everyone toward a narrative with a ritual at the center. In October, exactly 1 year after the welfare check, a hiker found a painted sign nailed to a tree near a trailhead. It read, "The ritual is over," and below it was a hand-drawn circle symbol and a set of numbers like Tyler's audio pattern. Investigators never confirmed who posted it because rain blurred prints and nearby cameras were pointed away from the trailhead. Some locals claimed it was a confession, though state records treated it as vandalism, documented and removed within hours. Lyle drove to the trailhead with Ethan and Marla, and they stood where the sign had been, looking at wet bark scars. No one spoke about ghosts or curses in official notes, yet everyone understood why locals did, because the case never stabilized. Dispatch logs reportedly show one last call that night, a report of chanting near the river, then officers arrived to nothing. Investigators never confirmed whether that call was real, mistaken, or deliberate provocation because the caller refused to identify themselves. By winter, the file remained open, labeled Missing Endangered, with conflicting artifacts and testimony that never fully aligned. Ethan returned to work, Marla finished her thesis with careful language, and Lyle kept the evidence sealed and indexed. Some locals claimed Tyler passed through a ritual and never came back the same, yet investigators never confirmed he came back at all. In county records, the final summary states only this: the ritual narrative persisted because the facts left too much room.